on to another issue where workers are standing up for their rights in a state that does quite a bit to try to crush workers' rights, and that's the state of Texas. And that is the issue we're talking about specifically here. Unbelievable, just abrogation of workers' rights to water breaks and other things, even in the midst of this massive heat wave. And we are very honored to be joined here by Tevita Uhatafe, who is the first vice president of the Tarrant County Central Labor Council in Texas. Fort Worth, stand up. Tevita, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, y'all.
Well, it's an honor to have you. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people around the country have seen maybe the headline that workers in Texas have been denied, at least legally required, water breaks. Tell us what's happening here with this issue, which seems, it just seems shocking given where we are weather-wise.
Well, it's both simple and complex. The simple thing is it's a total disregard for life and welfare of the workers who work outside, particularly in the construction industry. That is an industry in Texas, at least I know, that does have a large undocumented workforce. So this kind of bill not only attacks workers, but it attacks the people who are most likely to not say anything about it for fear of being caught up with some kind of government issue. So it's very dangerous because the people who are going to be affected the most are the ones that are most vulnerable in our communities.
I was so surprised to see that as of now, it's like the requirement is every 4 hours, a 10-minute water break, which seems already insufficient, especially in the amount of or the high temperatures that we're seeing all across the world right now. But of course, particularly in places like Texas, Arizona, all these areas. So that already seems insufficient. So this would mean exactly what? Like when we're talking about workers that work in certain industries, particularly outdoors in these very high degrees of heat, what would this mean if passed for those workers in terms of the breaks they get? Do they just not get breaks?
So they're leaving it ultimately up to the employers. And so, I mean, I can elaborate on that, but we're talking about an industry where people are being exploited with low wages, or, especially if they're undocumented, or that there's no way to escape the heat. They are surrounded by concrete, asphalt, sheet metal, exhaust from vehicles. Like there's no way to escape the heat. So you're telling me like a 10-minute break of water is too much to ask for? In this record heat wave where we're having heat advisories well into the night, 10, 11 o'clock at night. You try to make sense of something, but then you figure that they are so out of touch in Austin. These are people who don't know what workers are experiencing outside because they're not outside. And if they cared, or if they, even cared to go and stop and ask a worker how it feels to work outside in the construction trade and not be able to have a water break come September 1st, I mean, it's immoral and it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And regardless of who is the worker, nobody should have to suffer under those conditions. It should be a right to have a break, to take a water break. This is going to kill people, and we are not prepared for it, but that's where it's going. And it's going to be the most vulnerable workers who are going to be the farm workers, and we're going to be asking employers to take the responsibility. I worked for an employer that has a water program or hydration program, and we're still struggling with keeping people hydrated in these high temperature heats. So you can't tell me that a company that's going to have a hydration program is going to have the same concern unless people start dropping dead left and right. And then they're going to start having to hire again, because that's how it is. We are employee numbers. We are expendable. under these kind of laws.
I think that's a very good point, and sort of maybe the other aspect of this as well, or one of many aspects, is, this whole Death Star bill that is bringing this in, that's the name that's given to the package of laws. It seems like an amazing attack on worker political power, because they're essentially stripping the ability of workers to pass laws that help them in the places where they've been able to gain the political influence to encourage that amongst lawmakers.
Yeah, absolutely. In the city that I live in, Euless, Texas, back in 2020, we passed a fair overtime ordinance that was put on the ballot with a 72% approval by the city of Euless. This was to protect workers in our community from being forced overtime last minute, right before they were ready to clock out. So a bill like this would just kill the will of the voters. This is the voice of the voters who said that this was something that was important to the city of Euless. And it was an idea that we were going to use in other communities so that we can help other communities also protect workers from being forced overtime. This is an example of attacks, and for no reason, attacking bills that help people keep the economy running. That's it.
So I also think that this, on top of speaking to like the fact that Greg Abbott is just a heartless monster. Am I allowed to say that? I'm just going to say that. It also speaks to the fact that, like, why isn't there a law nationally about this? Like, why is this being left up to a state to even determine? And I don't know if that's a question you can really answer. I guess I would just have assumed that in a country as developed as the U.S., there would be this water breaks would be like just a part of what exists for like worker safety across the country, and not left up to this or that governor or legislator or like kooky person here or there being funded by whatever industry to make sure that workers have like zero rights whatsoever, even the right to water.
No, that's a great question. And that's a question that we all should be asking each other. Like, how in this most developed country on the history of the world, why are we still talking about what is good enough for a worker to have as far as a break? Because without our production, there is no income for anybody, whether it's the boss or the employees. So why would you want to kill off your workforce? What motivates you to take away a break, which could mean life or death, literally, especially in this kind of heat? Why would you want to hurt your workforce and then have to deal with the whole narrative of nobody wants to work, you can't find anybody? Well, you can't find anybody if you're killing them. And that's what's going on here. And you would think that the federal government would get their act together, but there is so much politics that is put into play of people's lives. And the people who are affected the most are the workers first and their families, because nobody else is going to be most affected except for that family that's going to have a loved one who's lost, who's the main income, and now they're left to figure out, what do we do? This is a moral issue that this country needs to address.
I was hoping you could also talk about how workers are organizing, standing up, and fighting back against this law and other unjust practices there in Texas. I think, nationally, a lot of people just think, oh, Texas, very right-wing country. But I know that very right-wing state. But I know at a lower level, not a lower level, but, beneath that headline, there's a lot of worker organizing and a lot of progressive folks who are putting shoulder to the wheel, as it were. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There are different organizations that are coming together, organizations that represent labor, people of color, the construction industry, who are calling their representatives, even though this is passed, to see if there's a way where they can have it where it's not enforced, where employees or employers are still put into a position where they have to at least give them the 10-minute break. And that's going to be an ongoing conversation and discussion well into the summer, because this starts September 1st. So we still have a lot of time. well, very little time at this point, but to kind of mitigate the total effect of the bill, we still have little time to kind of communicate and reach out to both aisles, because it's one way to, we can reach out to our friends, but if the majority is not hearing us, then it's all for nothing. We're wasting our time. So there's a coalition, and there's too many to name, and I don't want to leave anybody out. But there are people working behind the scenes to make sure that the smallest break that somebody can use to hydrate, that's not too much to ask. I don't think so. We need to kind of give them, like, I guess, moral help or something. I don't know, like, kind of educate them, but that's what we're going to continue to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm so curious, like, what is the argument being made by those who are proponents of this to justify it? I'm just curious, like, because I so far, a lot of the news reports I've seen they seem to recognize how inhumane and outrageous this is. So who is openly and publicly advocating for it? And what are they actually saying in their argument?
That's a good question. I'd like to ask my politicians in Austin that same question. Who is advocating for this, and who is saying that this is something that's okay? Because if you're saying it's not okay, you're saying that there might be something, an issue with the means of production. Well, then if you don't have enough employees, that's an employer problem. You should not be forcing that on your current employees to pick up the slack. Maybe you need to scale back a little bit. Maybe you haven't thought about that. These are things that are very simple to us who think that it's okay to have a break, but they make it so complex. And at the end of the day, it's about making money. The less time we're sitting taking a break, the more production you're going to get out of us. And that means the bottom dollar is going to be affected positively for them. Unfortunately for us, we're going to be huffing and puffing looking for water at the end of the shift. And God forbid we even drop dead right there before we clock out.
Tevita Uhatafe, First Vice President of the Tarrant County Central Labor Council, we really appreciate you joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you so much.